Welcome back to another episode of Independent Thought, everyone. My name is Desmond Price, and we are joined for the second part here of our panel discussion with my panel that I hope you're seeing for the second time. If you have not seen our first part of this conversation, please refer to the episode description where I have a link to the previous episode. So once again, I will be introducing our great panelists before we get into our discussions today. Our topics for today will be involving vaccine mandates and YouTube banning vaccine disinformation, misinformation, however you want to classify it. So first, I want to go ahead and reintroduce my panel, starting off with to my right here. I want to introduce Rashida Green, the host of the Crossroads podcast. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Desmond. I'm glad to be back.
Thank you. And I also now want to reintroduce Miss Elise Mango, the host of 45 different podcasts. No, I'm just playing. The host of the Shall We Proceed podcast, coming back on. Thank you so much for being here again.
Thank you for having me.
And we are also rejoined by Zach, the host of the Plaid Jacket Philosopher podcast. My mistake there. How are you doing today?
Oh, good. Thanks for having me again, man. Looking forward to this.
All right. And our host of Fresh Faces, New Ideas, David, how are you doing today? Welcome back on the podcast.
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. I like to think I'm permanent on this, but yeah.
It's trying to manifest it one way or another. All right. So we're going to get started here with this. Our president, Joe Biden, he announced just about a month or so ago that all companies in America who have employees, I think the company sides that have 100 or more employees would be mandated to get the vaccine or they would have to undergo consistent testing. I think it's weekly testing. Someone might have to fact check me on that. So this plans to be, I guess, carried out by OSHA. They're going to be the ones who are going to be governing over this. They're going to be levying fines against companies who do not comply, up to $13,000 and some change per violation. And for repeat offenders, they can be fined up to 10 times as much. Now, this will affect close to 80 million workers in our country. So the question I'm going to open up to our panel here is, do we believe that this vaccine mandate is just or is it unjust? What is everyone's feelings on it? I want to start off with Fresh Faces, New Ideas. Please give us your thoughts on this. Do you believe that this was the right move by the president to put down this mandate?
It's like not even really a mandate because you can opt out of it. But let's be clear about them. Vaccine mandates are both a functional thing that's existed in this country for about 116 years is the Supreme Court case that said it. And also they are incredibly effective. So when you see those big scary headlines, which is 175 nurses fired in North Carolina, or whatever you're going to see for New York City, because their actual mandate is, I think it's next week is when it goes into effect. You have to understand that those headlines, like the same headlines of person gets COVID shot, dies 3 weeks later, and then you read the article and they got hit by a bus, are misleading. The North Carolina one, 175 people out of 35,000 employees were fired. United Airlines, I believe it is, that had 99.5% of their staff is fully vaccinated. That is equivalent to 0.5% of their staff unequivalent. And as those people who've been saying that COVID's not so bad have been arguing, oh, you have a 99.7% chance of surviving. Well, this is statistically the same. So make up your mind. Is it statistically different when it's a death sentence versus when it's an option that you can do, or does it not matter either way? But if these mandates are effective, and look, at this point, I'm tired of this argument. We're going to have to deal with another fight with this pill because already this is being misrepresented in the news. But yes, these mandates are both needed and effective.
Okay. And so we are now going to be going over to Rashida Green. What are your thoughts on this vaccine mandate? Do you believe that it is just or unjust? Where do you fall in this conversation?
This is very hard for me for a lot of reasons. There's I think one thing that we can say about this is that we do not seem to have the same sort of trust that we had once upon a time when we were trying to vaccinate against polio. I think people are definitely a lot more cautious or leery about what they take into their bodies, which is really interesting because we eat, things from McDonald's and all other kinds of things and experiment with different things and insert and stuff. And yet we have all this to say about a vaccine. I do have a lot of qualms about requiring people to get a vaccine. I would say with what we know that this vaccine is effective. We've seen these so far. We've seen the efficacy of it. We also know that folks who are still vaccinated are running around, still infecting people, possibly. So I would say in order for us to have enough built up immunity, just the same way we need for the other infectious diseases that we have or we do or have developed vaccines for, I think, unfortunately, and I don't like it, but I do think it might be necessary, especially depending on the industry in which folks are working, where it's over 100 people. Like I would say a hospital is a key place where folks do need to be vaccinated. But at the same time, I do understand the concern of folks who feel like this is too fast or they would like to see more of the data and more of the information. I get that too.
Okay. And our next panelist I want to hear from is Zach. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Do you believe that vaccine mandates like this are just or unjust? Where do you fall on this?
I'm pretty staunchly in the unjust corner of this one. Now, that's also coming from Canada. We have a different aspect to our mandate, but it's anyway. I'll talk about the Biden one first, I guess, because it's still affecting 80 million people. Now, yeah, I do think, like Fresh Faces had said, it's not really a mandate if you're still allowed to weekly test. Like, you still do have an out. They can't fire you if you're not taking it, so that's fine. And when it comes to up here in Canada, in some regions, we have 20% of our hospital staff is unvaccinated or unknown. And reasonably speaking, if you put unknown on the questionnaire, it can be pretty rest assured you're unvaccinated in that case when it's a voluntary admission. So when you're looking at 20%, now that's a very different stance than we have in the South Carolina case that you had discussed, because if you have 20% of your hospital, and I think it's by October 26th, at least in British Columbia, we need to have all of the healthcare administrators vaccinated or else they're fired. That's it, right? So if you have 20% of your hospital staff walking away, that is a massive, massive group. And if you're saying that, either we have this pandemic where we need all hands on deck, and I'm not arguing that point at all. I know we're in the middle of a pandemic, but either you need all your hospital staff on hand, or you can allow 15 to 20% of them to walk away off the job. Like, what is it? We can't have both things here. It doesn't work. And yeah, as far as in Canada, we can talk about this more in the discussion area, but we have mandates in place and they're more targeted at any kind of public meeting places, restaurants. Ironically, it's only places with a liquor license. So if it doesn't have a liquor license, you can still go sit down and eat. Again, arbitrary, but you're not allowed sporting events, movie theaters, any outside gathering now over 50 people. Everybody has to be vaccinated. So right now, I can't go watch my kid's soccer game, despite the fact that we've heard the whole way through this pandemic that if you have, any of the marches or protests outside, as long as it's outside in the sunlight, this thing doesn't spread outside. But now all of a sudden, I can't go watch my kid's soccer game at a soccer field. It doesn't make any sense. Again, Canada isn't the same as the States, but I'm sure we'll get into that more in the discussion area. But I'm against it in general. I don't think that you should mandate what people should be putting into their bodies. I understand that there's a different precedent set 116 years ago, but like we're talking about with having younger voters coming in, people are allowed to access a lot more different information now. We're allowed to actually research some of this stuff. And I think that mandating something for everybody to take is just the wrong step to take for a little added shred of protection or perceived protection.
Okay. And finally, I want to ask Erlene, what are your thoughts on this vaccine mandate, or mandate in air quotations, that the Biden administration has put forth? Unjust, just, where do you fall on this?
I'm extremely torn because I do not agree with someone trying to tell me what to do and what to take. You know what I mean? But I'm a woman, so clearly the government is showing me different. But also, I do understand wanting more information, and the media has totally destroyed how people think because they put things out too early or they put misinformation. Whatever it is, I think media tends to make the water boil more, so you just don't know what's going on. And granted, like Zach was saying, we have the means for education and looking things up on our own, but when it comes to science, I'm a liberal arts major. I don't know what's going on. I'm relying on someone to tell me what I should and shouldn't do. But I'm really torn on it because if I'm walking into a brand new environment and you tell me this is what I must do, I have the choice to say I want to be here or not. If I'm already here and now you're telling me that I have to do something, that's hard for me. And I'm also of the vein, I don't have to tell you if I am vaccinated or not. That should be my right to tell you yes or no. You know what I mean? So I'm really torn on it because at the beginning of this conversation, no one said you had to do it. It's coming. We're trying because we're all having these first world issues. Things people are getting sick. What are you gonna do about it? How are we gonna fix this? We're trying to fix it. Now we're fighting against it because there's been too many different twists and turns in the conversation. And I do understand both sides of the frustration. So for me, I'm really torn. I need to hear more about everything. And I do understand why in certain industries, like Rashida said, I don't understand why they're not doing it in certain industries where if you're in the medical field, I don't understand why. So what are you not telling me? You know what I mean? And in others, what's the point? So I'm really torn when it comes to this conversation because I see all sides of it. So
Okay.
that's where I sit. I'm sorry, I have no definite.
Oh no,
So
you're fine. You're fine. I think before I open it up here, the first thing that I want to say is, we didn't have a whole lot of disagreements in our last conversation together. So I think it's probably a good thing for discussion that there is some disagreement amongst people here for this, but there is a lot of disagreements, I think, across the country and across the world about what is going on with the vaccine, around vaccine mandates. I know personally, when I listen to other debate panels or when I listen to people talk about this on the news or when I hear, it always feels like there's either the one or the extremes position, but a lot of people are kind of in the middle, just trying to figure it out. They're just trying to figure out exactly what is going on. And so I'm glad that we have some voices representing that right now. And so before I open it up, I want to just add on this. There are some restrictions that are being put into place that just don't quite make sense, like to me personally. First of all, I want to say, like I've said in previous panels, I got the vaccine. I am vaccinated. I think vaccines are a general good thing. However, I'm not a real big mandate person. I'm not on board with them. Some of them make sense to me. I think mandates for schools make sense to me. Mandates for the military have always been that way. I don't see any problem with it. Mandates for healthcare workers make sense for me. But, let's put it back to the company thing for a second here. Let's say you're a company like Google. Obviously, you have more than 100 employees, but a lot of these Google workers are now remote workers. And so should a remote worker have to be mandated to get the vaccine, even though they work from home all the time? Let's say they just don't want to take it. They're not in an office with hundreds or thousands of people, where if you were indoors all the time around hundreds of thousands of people, that might be an area where you want people to be vaccinated because you have such a large amount of exposure going on in an indoor environment. But if you're at home, should you be subjected to the same level of rules that you would be otherwise if you were someone working in a large office space? So these are things that I'm just genuinely just curious about. And I guess as somebody, this is a separate topic here, but I guess as somebody who's really pro-choice, I have a hard time saying like some people deserve body autonomy, but other people's do not. So I'm all for incentivizing vaccines, but mandating does feel a little murky for me. But with that being said, I want to open up to the panel here. I want to hear everyone else's thoughts on this. Come in. Just let me hear what you guys have to say about what each other's opening statements were.
Well, I think you're bang on as far as the dividing line. And again, like my body, my choice. Bodily autonomy is it right or is it not? And that's really what this argument comes to. Like, I have no problem with anybody, like you said, incentivizing vaccines, or I don't have an argument against the vaccine. That's not my argument. My argument is against the mandate and the idea that that you can force this upon somebody. Like it just, that's where things really get murky to me. It's the idea that, I have nothing against the argument of everybody should be vaccinated, but my line in the sand is everybody must. There isn't a one size fits all for most things in society. And again, when it comes to bodily autonomy, it's either a right or it isn't. And that's really the bottom line to me.
I got a lot. I do. This is like one of the 4 things that I constantly talk about on my channel. So a lot of the things there here that I can clear up a lot of it. The idea of people being vaccinated and spreading the virus. We have to clear this up very quickly. If you are vaccinated, you are less likely to catch the virus. So should you even get it, the ability for you to spread it is still less. Now, when it comes to being vaccinated and spreading it, the spread changes based on who you're passing it to. If you're passing it to somebody who is vaccinated, the ability for you to do that is significantly lower than for somebody who is unvaccinated. So the ability to spread it becomes irrelevant as more people are vaccinated. The other thing to this is, for people who are unvaccinated, you are somewhere between a 4 and 11 times chance of catching it and ending up in the hospital. In the US, we hit 700,000 deaths recently. It's something in the realm of the last 100 to 200,000 could have been avoidable. As for some of the other things, the my body, my choice. Let's take a look at this. When a woman gets an abortion, do 7 to 8 other people get an abortion as well? Because they don't. That's what we're talking about for Delta. Delta has a spread equivalent to the measles and chickenpox, which is for every one person infected, they have the likelihood to infect up to 8 or 9 other people. So this is not an equivalent argument to say that my body, my choice for abortion is the same as the ability to spread a plague. Let's go to things. Elise, you brought up a really good point when you're talking about, I don't understand the science. That's true. 99% of us have no idea what we're looking at when we're looking at these articles. I generally, when I'm covering them on screen, I do my best to read it. My eyes kind of glaze over, and then I'm reading the summaries. So this idea that people are like, I don't trust the testing, or I wanted to have more testing, or I don't trust the science yet. The question comes into, what would change your mind? What do you think that you, the average person, could ask that the scientists who do this for a living have not been able to think of and do? And what changed for this versus for other things? Because there are some differences. As for the outdoor thing, the outdoor thing, we have to also compare to what was currently happening versus the current spread. During the mass protests of the Black Lives Matter movement of last year, we were dealing with the base spread of the virus. Now we're dealing with Delta, which is at least twice as contagious, if not more. There was recently an article, there was this other variant called a Mu variant. It infected about 2% of Americans, and it is currently dead. And the reason for that is it is less viral than the Delta variant. And because of that, it could not spread in the same way. So the idea of which virus is more transmissible is a reason. When we talk about should you be forced to do it, the reason that we have to do this is because we gave them a choice. You had the option to do this for a while. Certain states gave you incentives to do it. You got money in a bunch of states. In West Virginia, they were giving away trucks, and they were giving away cars, and they were giving away a hunting license. And unfortunately, people didn't do the right thing. And then we saw what happened when a more transmissible scene came along, and it basically just ripped through the areas where they were unvaccinated. That's why they had this high death toll. That's why we were hitting death tolls not as bad as originally the pandemic. When Donald Trump left office, the first month of the Joe Biden's administration, we were losing 4,000 people a day. We peaked around 2,100, I believe. So the numbers were about half, but we also have better therapeutics to this. So it needs to be done in order to deal with this. Now I want to be very clear about something as well. We will not remove coronavirus from our lives by getting people vaccinated. Ultimately, the way to treat this is going to be like the flu. And with the advantage of this, the numeric pill, assuming it is allowed, it would help us deal with it on a more fundamental basis. The best way for us to deal with this is to ultimately treat it where every year or so you get a new booster for whatever the new variant. However, we are not anywhere near a level where the death tolls could be acceptable. We in the US, we lose about 60,000 people a year to the flu. This month or the last month, we lost about 100,000 people to COVID. So until we can drag these levels down to where at least the flu, we have to take these drastic measures to deal with this. And because as bad as it is here, It is going to be way worse somewhere else, because if we're too busy dealing with in the US, I think it's 70 million people who could be vaccinated but aren't. If we can't get them vaccinated, we're not going to be able to do the supply that we have, and we can't send it to like Africa where they have like 8 people vaccinated and the next variant is going to come out of there. We have to be able to take this vaccine that is so effective and spread it across the world to deal with this. Otherwise, we're going to live with this forever, and it's going to keep spiking.
We're going to live with it forever.
Yeah, but we don't have to live with it this badly.
All right,
But here's
Rashida,
the
Arlene,
thing.
do you want to
No
jump in?
one I'm sorry, go ahead, Rashida. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Arlene. Go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, go on, Arlene.
It's just a lot. The thing is, we're into an entitled society at the end of the day, okay? We do not want anyone telling us what we should and shouldn't do. We've already had people stop vaccinating their children a long time ago, and those children have gotten other kids sick because they're not vaccinated, right? That's a whole nother argument, whole nother side to things. I am not one to want to vaccinate. I don't get the flu shot. I never had the flu. I may not, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I've never had the flu. Right now, bless, I haven't had COVID in any way. It's just really hard because all of us are entitled and have privilege to do what we want to do. And even before we even had just to wear a mask and stay inside, people are fighting against it. So they're going to fight against it no matter what. We are not doing what we're supposed to do just to lessen the numbers. So now the hand is being forced. We can all agree upon that, right? But it's just really hard for me to swallow making someone do something. You know what I mean? Making them do it when you said it wouldn't happen. That's the pushback. You didn't say if they had said at some point in time, once they get the vaccine, we're all going to have to do it, then we can still fuss and fight, but it was already in the air. It wasn't in the air then, it's in the air now. And there isn't really a right or wrong, because you may not want to put in your body, and that's your choice, right? But also with that, don't beat me down if I don't want to. And I shouldn't beat you up because you want to. We're not going to win. This is not going to go away. Like you're saying, COVID is going to be here to stay. It's been here for a very long time. From my understanding, been here for a very, very long time. I just don't know how we're not going to be able to get along on this one. I don't think anyone's going to be able to get along on this one. But then it's going to turn into a separation of the have and the have-nots. And it's going to be a whole nother ugliness. You're not going to be able to travel. You can't come here. You can't come in my building. And it's going to cause some type of purge situation that I am not prepared for. I mean, I know that may sound crazy, but I just think there isn't an answer to this because there hasn't been consistent information and there's no transparency at all. And that's the biggest issue. When you're not transparent, transparent and it's inconsistent, you have people who are uneasy. And how do you fix that?
I also want to throw in one other additional fact into this particular mandate. So OSHA is supposed to be the one carrying this out. They're supposed to be going around just policing this, trying to figure out whether or not companies are being compliant or not. OSHA is one of the most chronically understaffed just programs that we have in America. I think they have less than 2,000 employees who would be doing these quote unquote checks. And so I think they're actually relying on the fact there's going to be a lot of, let's just call it what it is, a lot of snitching going on. They just want people to reach out to them and let them know if their coworkers are unvaccinated. Is that going to cause some problems? Rashida, what do you think?
Barely keep it together. I mean, coworkers already have enough reason to snitch on each other, and working from home has kind of helped to lighten that load a little bit. It's hard, and I struggle with this because I am, I have the field of the work I do in my part of my day job. So I know the fears of being forced to have to take this vaccine. And I think that unfortunately, because we've gotten to this point, but I think for some folks, because I know that there's a lot of pushback, and kind of to go a little bit further with it, I think that there is enough information. I know for me, and this is again, my privilege, is having someone sit down, a PhD scientist, sit down with me and draw me a diagram of the efficacy of the vaccine, what happened, the different pitfalls, and to kind of understand that process so I can understand the ramifications of this vaccine, how we got here so quickly. Because I know that was a very serious note or point of contention for folks. Like, how do we get this vaccine on the market so quickly? And part of it is with using mRNA as opposed to the traditional routes that we use with DNA, which takes a lot longer to get through with the purification process, et cetera. So with all that, that's, people may not have all that information, or they may not feel like going out and doing the research on that. And given just even taking it a step further, there's a couple of points. First, we're not really doing the equal work of talking about homeopathic or natural remedies and as alternatives to regular standard medicine that could be just as effective in helping us on our personal and our herd immunity, as opposed to just going for a vaccine. That there's not equal amount of information, and also in some situations, in some circles, the demonetizing of those who would want to bring that kind of information to the forefront. We're giving people alternatives to mainstream medicine. There's also the negative and complete history of African Americans and the medical community. I mean, let's just get on right down to the brass ass tacks here. Anybody want to read a medical apartheid? I had to stop halfway through. I wanted to do it at a book club and couldn't commit. It's that bad. So when you think about those things, and you have any person with a lab coat on talking about anything about DNA or RNA or mRNA, people just kind of gloss over. But I do think this is kind of the unfortunate thing, that an unfortunate point that we've gotten to with this need, unfortunately, for a mandate.
Can I ask?
Well-
I have a couple of things. The homeopathic medicines. When I want to just very briefly ask about that. You're referring to them as treatments, not as preventatives, right? Because look, we do know that the people who are generally succumb to this virus are generally overweight, or they're old, or they have some type of underlying condition. And obviously in America, a way to deal with that would be to switch to a universal healthcare system so people can take care of their underlying issues. It's to help us treat better. And like, obviously we should do that. And that's a totally different issue, but just saying that, oh, because people are fat, we can't have them be vaccinated is not really a good enough answer.
Up. So let's pull the car over, because I didn't say that.
Right. No, I'm not saying that directly that you
Okay.
said that. I'm referring to a very common talking point that I hear. Basically, people are fat, and that's why they're dying. That's why I asked specifically whether you're asking as a preventative versus a cure. Because when we talk about cures, we're talking about, and I hear like homeostasis, I think ivermectin. And that's why I'm directly asking like what you mean specifically for that. And as for this idea of like, at least you said, there's not enough clear. It's the conversation's been shut down. This is a talking point that's not really matched by what's going on. So when we talk about like people who are unable to talk about things, it's a lot of people who are spreading misinformation. For in America, there's 12 people who are directly responsible for like a vast majority of the misinformation. Dr. Tenpenny is like my favorite example. That woman is a lunatic. The American frontlines doctors should be in jail for what they're doing to these people. We have to like like the information is out there. And I totally agree that African Americans and minorities have plenty of reason not to trust this. There's a vast history. And I think part of it, we have to focus more on our outreach. Those are some of the areas where we have the hardest time getting the vaccines to. And we have to figure out how to do the outreach to that area better. And I'm not going to downplay that. That's absolutely an issue. And I don't know personally how to bridge that gap, because that's not something I have ever dealt with, or people that I directly know. And so somebody can better, but that's really where, like, I don't think the home. I would like to hear what you mean directly about the homeopathic stuff, because that kind of scares me a little bit. And yeah, the mRNA.
Well,
and
it shouldn't.
No,
because we have
only in the
everything
sense-
in our bodies to heal ourselves. I mean, we do have that effect, and that's not just some hippie nonsense. And you're not talking to someone who is not
You're not
equally
talking about like
hippie
crystals.
and science. I'm not saying we didn't have to go into crystals, but I'm strictly saying or specifically saying that we are not being given the full and clear picture from our government about what is available to us naturally, as opposed to what has to be produced, or what is produced as a part of this vaccine. Now, what am I not saying? I'm not saying that eating mangoes is a substitution for preventing sepsis. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is there has to be equal amounts of both. And right now, that is not what's happening. That people are not being encouraged to eat right. People are not being encouraged they're being allowed to do whatever they want to. Popeyes is always open. You can get Uber Eats any time of the day or night. That's the one thing that did not stop clicking this entire pandemic. But was there equal discussion about how people can actually change their diets and change their lives? I'm just saying. So if we're going to be able to, I'm just saying that we need to be able to have both. And there was a lot of less of that and just more of, eat whatever the hell you want, but take this shot, as
Oh,
opposed to a balance.
And
Well,
if
yeah.
I may piggyback on that, I'm sorry, Zach, let me piggyback on that. So and not saying you, I'm just saying, so we're pushing vehicles, gift cards, all these things to get a vaccine, but we're not pushing on top of that. I know I've been sitting at home for a year. Let's walk outside for a little bit. Let's have that vitamin C. Let's do other things, because everything else, they show you preventative on both sides. With this, we can be better. And that's not happening. So we're pushing something, but we're not also pushing the other side of it. And we're talking about people who are this or that, when in my frame of reference, I've seen people who may appear super healthy who are still in the hospital on a ventilator. So it's like, what are we encouraging? We're just encouraging a shot, because some people are so misinformed, thinking getting the vaccine means I will never get it, which no one said that. But they're thinking that it's like, you have to also take care of yourself. You have to also be mindful of going into these big crowds and doing all these things to make sure it also kind of helps combat the whole spreading. So you're hearing less of that. And we're giving it, and to me, it cheapens it when you want to give me a gift card, you want to give me a vehicle just to get a shot. Why are you trying to just give me these things to get? It's like, I don't like that part of it. I don't like that.
And I think we're almost getting into what's going to be the next topic as far as censorship goes regarding any vaccine
Oh, I
disinformation.
have plenty of stuff on that. Don't
I have,
worry.
Yeah,
I
'cause
don't mind going
all right.
more on this, because this
So
is good, because I think
before we
I'm
get-
by myself on this one.
Right. So before we get into this, there's a few points. So one thing that you had said, Fresh Faces, was that, people were incentivized, all this stuff, but they didn't do the right thing. So now they have to take it, when, we had just discussed how you can't legislate morality. So by saying they didn't do the right thing, we can't now just say, well, too bad, you're taking it because this is the right thing. We can't legislate morality. As far as the abortion argument, this isn't my argument, but this is one that is interesting. So yes, by your stats, you may be able to spread it to 7 to 8 people who have, then let's call it an average. I don't know what the mortality rate is in the States. In Canada, it's somewhere around 2%, something like that. So you have a 2% chance of killing 7 or 8 people, or you have a 100% chance of terminating one life. And again, I'm not having this argument. I'm pro-choice 100%, but that is where the counter that argument comes in. You are for sure terminating one life as opposed to possibly endangering 7 to 8. So that's where the abortion argument comes in. And as far as healthcare goes, at least in Canada, Canadian nurses, the flu shot has always been optional. You may take the flu shot, and if you don't take the flu shot, then you just have to wear a mask during flu season. That's the way it's been in Canada. So now legislating the COVID vaccine is something entirely different that we haven't had to deal with here before. Again, as far as like what Elise was saying earlier too, like in not getting vaccinated, like this, for me personally, was never meant to be a political stance. This is supposed to be my own private decision. It's like, I go to the gym 5 times a week. I take my vitamin C, D, zinc, magnesium, and multivitamin every day. Like that's just been my regimen since March. I'm pretty sure, again, we don't have proof because we didn't have access to testing in February of 2020. But right before we went into our first lockdown in BC and we saw our first spike of the Alpha variant, my whole family got sick for about 10 days. We had all the same matching symptoms, 4 really bad days, no sense of smell, no taste. Ripped through me and my wife and my kids. It was maybe 30 hours of light cold symptoms. So again, we didn't have access to testing, so I don't have a confirmed positive test, but I'm pretty sure our family already dealt with it. as far as, you know, like you guys were talking about with the effects of this by everybody staying at home, I read a stat that it was something like childhood obesity in the States went from 34% roughly to around 42.6% of children in the States are now registered obese over this lockdown. Like that's horrendous. And that's, again, another byproduct of these lockdowns that isn't being discussed. Like Elise and Rashida were saying, like there are a lot of other factors here that are not being discussed. And that's going to come into vaccine misinformation and the banning of one side of the discussion. But that's unacceptable. Like there are so many other things going on here. And then again, like you guys were talking about, even the moral argument that you cannot pass it along if you're vaccinated, or you know, all of that stuff. Like when we were, I'm looking at my Facebook timeline here this morning. Like I have friends who are they're fully vaccinated and they're at different a music festival right now where, you know, everybody who's there, they all have to be vaccinated, but fully no masks, no nothing. Everybody's close. Like you could be having spreading going on there. You could have a super spreader event. They all go home to their family that's not vaccinated, and all of a sudden it does spread. So the fact that it does still spread and there's still a definite option of it. So to make it seem like this is the completely safe way to deal with it is just, it's false. There isn't a moral argument there.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
I think this is good because I think we have a lot of good pushback.
No, I think we're gonna actually
the moral argument. Let's
hold on now.
Okay.
I think yep, moderator taking over the moderator chair. So I think we're actually going to move into our next topic. I think we all kind of spent a little bit on this topic. We all kind of got our points out there. I think everyone who's watching this understands, I think, where all of us stand on this subject. And I'm sure that we'll be able to reference back to it a little bit in our next topic anyway. But to avoid keeping us here for 3 hours, you know, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next topic here, which is our final topic.